Welcome to this video, which offers a summary of our report and an explanation of a sample of our findings. So before we dive into this report itself, let's recap on the key points from our previous video, which explains the letter that covers this report and serves as its executive summary. So the final letter in this series of 5 letters places the CEO and Board of Torbay Council on formal notice to rectify major organisational failures associated with the emergency planning and management, in part relating to climate emergency. We highlight that the current organisation system is not fit for the purpose of emergency planning, as it has not been designed and developed with the capabilities and approaches necessary to manage a complex systemic emergency effectively. The metaphor of a contemporary car seeking to drive off-road was used to illustrate this notion. The implications of emergency management and planning through the current council and regional partner organisations holds an imminent threat of catastrophic harm to the well-being of the people and this region from weak planning, bad decision making, bad policy, bad management and organisation. The momentum of policy rollout is accelerating at pace. Therefore, urgent rectification is required. 5 categories of major organisation failure and deficiencies have been identified, and we have suggested 5 areas for urgent reappraisal. This report also suggests a 5-step fast-track proposal of rectification with a central theme of critical voice inclusion. So, let's now dive into the report. Page number 2 offers an overview of the report and its contents, where we review and analyse the references and responses made by the Council to our 4 Freedom of Information request letters. Our inquiry was about seeking assurances from the Board and the CEO that its organisation is fit for the purpose of emergency planning and execution. Our findings are summarised in Part A with 2 executive summaries, one for the CEO and the Board, and one for its advisors and auditors. Part B presents our findings, identifying root causes of organisation and management problems with rectification suggestions. Part C offers 4 appendices covering each of the 4 Freedom of Information letters, with letter and response extracts, analysis and observations. Our conclusions highlight a significant threat of harm from the Council's organisation and management system, and an urgent need for strategic reappraisal. Notably in the addendum is a response from Climate Intelligence, CLINTEL, an international independent body concerned with climate change and policy issues. It is a response to the consultation about the Devon and Cornwall Adaptation Strategy, a key reference made by Torbay Council. So, what did we find? One useful way to look or think about organisations is a production or assembly line, where there are stages that parts are configured and assembled, being put together to form a product or a project. If the product is faulty, then the production line will be examined for the source of the problems and then rectified. In a similar manner, we can consider one of the outputs from the Torbay Council's production line or organisation system that is related to the climate emergency. That is, the recent completed project associated with the decarbonisation of the leisure centre. Completed in 2022, the scheme replaced gas boilers by adopting alternative energy sources. Raising alarm bells is the project cost of 1.8 million, with a return on investment of 200 years. A return from an annual saving of £9,000 in energy costs. That is long in excess of the life cycle of the equipment and building. The scheme claims benefits of carbon reduction to an equivalent of taking 167 cars off the road each year. So we would question, is the heating system of the leisure centre really an emergency that warrants 1.8 million public sector investment, particularly at a time of economic hardship? Perhaps this indicates questionable judgment and priorities. Furthermore, it raises concerns about the sensitivity and effectiveness of the organisation that produces such a project and promotes it as a flagship demonstration. It also raises alarm bells about the rigour and effectiveness of the audit and governing systems in place to oversee value, risk and strategic prioritisation. So the quality of outputs from the council organisation presents cause for concern and rings an alarm bell pointing to underlying problems in the system. In our Freedom of Information letters, we asked about risk management, which sits further back along the organisation's production line. Pages 34 and 35 offer observations and analysis of the Council's response. One example, illustrated here, shows a risk assessment citing a 70 centimetre rise in sea fall as almost certain by 2050. This provides the highest risk ranking in the whole system with a score of 25. So if we take a historical precedent, global sea level was 20 centimetres above today's level in the medieval warm period, which is warmer than the present. It was 20 centimetres below today's level in the Little Ice Age in the 17th century, when the Thames used to freeze over every winter. The IPCC has been forced to reduce its original and widely exaggerated forecasts of sea level rise in each of its 6 assessment reports. After allowing for isostatic adjustments, which varies from place to place, sea level is rising at just 0.1 millimetre per year, equivalent to 10 centimetres per century. Pragmatically, with high probability, by 2050, that's 25 years, we can expect a sea level rise of about 2.5 centimetres. A 70 centimetre sea level rise, assessed as almost certain probability, and a ranking of 5, is clearly a wild exaggeration and distorts the actual level of threat, risk scoring, from 10 or below to a misleading 25. This shows highly questionable judgment on behalf of the people assessing, planning and managing these risks. The implications are significant, as this distorts funding and business cases. It can lead to inappropriate and misguided management also create unnecessary alarm and distort strategic prioritization. Furthermore, this example rings an alarm bell to the underlying problems. It was reported that the risk management system in Torbay Council has recently been upgraded, involving staff training. Clearly, there are shortcomings in the updated system, as there is an inability to properly categorise emergencies, there is a lack of pragmatic challenge, there is bias and distortion, and there's failures to spot over-exaggerated and inflated risks. Not only in Torbay, we found that this over-exaggeration, bias and distortion associated with risks and the assessments are evident and repeated across the southwest region. The problems identified here are institutional. Continuing back along the organisation's assembly line, we asked about the Council's impact assessments, which should offer critical strategic insight and information for planning and decision making. One impact assessment referred to in the Council's response was undertaken by a single environmental officer at County Council level, drawing on 3 sources of information and subject to no consultation whatsoever. We were alarmed to find that after 4 years since declaring an emergency, no impact assessment on the effects of the zero carbon policy on the citizens and this region has been created or commissioned. From our own research, the best impact assessment for the UK as a whole is the Absolute Zero report published in December 2019. It was created by 6 UK leading universities, and the report was commissioned by the UK government. Some of the highlights from this study are: by 2030, consumption of meat reduces by 50%. Only 3 new items of clothing per person per year. Production of petrol and diesel vehicles end. 1 short haul flight once every 3 years per person. All home appliances become electric. All UK airports close except Heathrow, Glasgow and Belfast. By 2050, all air traffic will cease. All non-renewable energy production will cease. All non-electric cars will be phased out by 2050, and there will be 60% fewer and smaller cars on the road. All existing forms of blast furnace production will be halted, meaning that the construction industry will have to either radically change its production methods or close. Buildings will become smaller and much more expensive. All naval shipping will cease, with the possibility of some freight ships resuming if they can be fueled by nuclear power. And all consumption of beef and lamb will cease, along with all overseas food that is not imported by rail. Furthermore, it reports that the technology does not exist to scale a replacement power grid for the country to be powered by alternative fuels. This rings alarm bells and raises some questions. Were decision makers and councillors adequately aware of the impacts on citizens, the economy and the region before making the decisions to set accelerated carbon reduction targets? What options were considered? And 4 years on since declaring an emergency of such gravity as to mandate without delay accelerated policies to pursue zero carbon, where are the regional impact assessments? And why was this not identified by advisory and audit? This begins to raise the alarm bells about decision making and the Nature Advisory, as we again move further up the organisation assembly line. Torbay Council reported that the decision to declare an emergency was informed by one single source of reference, the IPCC Special Report, and a single narrative of climate alarmism now has been deployed to qualify and declare a climate emergency, an emergency of such gravity as to mandate without delay accelerated policies to pursue zero carbon. The IPCC report and methodologies have been strongly contested for decades. Independent audit has highlighted non-consensus practices, scientific cherry-picking, and exaggerations associated with the IPCC practice and reports. Currently, there are more than 1,550 and growing experts strongly refuting a climate emergency and highlighting the inconsequential benefits and catastrophic effects from zero carbon policy. This raises alarm bells to the questions: why was this not included? Why was this not corrected subsequent to declaring an emergency in 2019? And why only one source of advice? Climate Intelligence Clintel was established in 2019 as an independent watchdog to monitor and report on climate change policy. Why is this and similar sources of critical voices still not being included in decision making and informing consultations? There you have it, an example of some of the failures, gaps and deficiencies identified from the Council's responses to our 4 Freedom of Information request letters. We may question why the Council's advisors and auditors, after 4 years of a declared emergency, have not identified and corrected these issues. It indicates a major failure in the non-executive function of the Council. We can identify and qualify the 5 categories of failure and deficiencies raised within our report. Like breaking a stick of Torquay rock, every part of the emergency organisation production line has an inner pattern showing all 5 of these deficiencies. This is not only evident at Torbay, but it is the same pattern across the region, emphasised by the responses made to the Devon, Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Climate Change Adaptation Strategy consultation provided by both Clintel and 7 concerned citizens. These are included in the addendum of our report and can also be found on our website. In order to begin tackling and rectifying these institutional problems in organisation and management evident across the region, we offer 5 suggested themes for urgent strategic reappraisal. To inform these 5 themes, we suggest a fast-track pathway through the reappraisal of the climate emergency and net zero policy. That includes the appointment of an independent and impartial inclusion advisor, to commission a team of expert advisors holding opposing positions in regard to the climate science, to construct a thorough scenario planning exercise in context of this region, and to commission thorough risk, value, impact and option assessments. These are all necessary precursors to properly inform public consultation and decision making. Of note, the strategic approach of declaring a climate emergency and mandating accelerated zero carbon targets adopted by the Council over the past 4 years considers only one scenario. This is an out of balance, dysfunctional strategy. As demonstrated within our report, this is infused with major organisational failure and defects. Left uncorrected, it poses an imminent, serious threat of harm to the well-being of citizens and this region. This video has been produced to support communication and an explanation of the findings from our report. The full report can be viewed and or downloaded as a PDF from our website. And if you are interested in following our progress, you can do so at our website, which is www.7concernedcitizens.co.uk. Thank you for your attention and interest in our work.